My sister called me with a broken voice. The sound came like a rough whisper, a thin thread of sand in her throat that I recognized instantly. It wasn't Lila's tone, not that strident liveliness that could fill a room and then make it explode into 1,000 pieces of laughter. It was something broken, something that had been torn inside and now only emitted a fragile, trembling sound. "I need to ask you something. Is your husband home right now?" The question was so absurd, so out of place on any Tuesday afternoon, that for a second I thought it was the preamble to a cruel joke. I looked toward the sofa. There he was, Gabriel, my Gabriel, with his bare feet on the leather ottoman that took him so long to choose, wrapped in those gray sweatpants that already had the crease of the worn, the comfortable, the ours. The TV screen projected blue and silver flashes on his face, illuminating the serene concentration with which he followed a documentary about the construction of a Norwegian oil tanker. Absurd, charmingly absurd. It was one of his many small Tuesday rituals, his afternoon of mental disconnection as he called it. "Yes," I replied, and I noticed a silly smile forming on my lips. "I have him right in front of me." I had the phone resting on my shoulder, while stirring the bolognese sauce that was gently bubbling in the pot. The aroma of tomato, basil and ground meat was the scent of our domestic happiness, a perfume I believed unbreakable. The wall clock, that old friend of dark wood, marked 6:27 in the afternoon. Outside, the autumn afternoon of October was beginning to turn orange and purple, filtering through the dining room windows and painting long shadows on the oak floor. She remained silent for a few seconds. A silence so dense, so heavy, that suddenly the bubbling of the sauce seemed obscenely loud. I heard her breathing, a light and wet gasp, as if she were holding back tears or wind. I couldn't tell which. "That's impossible," she whispered at last, and the word fell like a brick of ice directly into my stomach. "I'm seeing him board my plane with another woman. They're holding hands." The world didn't stop. There was no crash, no sharp blow. It was something worse. It was as if someone had suddenly found the master key to reality and turned it, revealing that everything, absolutely everything I believed, solid and true, was just a cardboard facade, a set, and now the set was falling apart, showing the infinite and black void that was behind it. The wooden spoon slipped from my fingers. It fell on the marble countertop with a dull click, splashing crimson dots on my white cotton blouse. I didn't care. I didn't feel it. My gaze fixed on Gabriel, on his neck, on those dark and rebellious curls that always escaped from his wool hat in winter, on the familiar curve of his shoulder, on the relaxed, genuine posture. "That's impossible," Lila had said, and it was. It had to be. But Lila didn't lie. Not about this. Not with that voice. "Lila," I managed to articulate. My voice sounded hundreds of kilometers away, as if it wasn't coming from me. "Where are you?" "At Heathrow Airport, Hada. At boarding gate B47, flight BA288 to Boston." They just passed through the finger. "He's wearing a navy blue jacket, the one you gave him for his birthday. She's blonde, slim. A beige coat." They're laughing. He's brushing her hair away from her face. Each word was an ice needle stabbing into my cornea. The navy blue jacket. I had chosen it with such care. It was made of soft, fine wool, that blue that brought out the color of his eyes. He had hugged me, and told me it was the most beautiful jacket he had ever had. "The one you gave him." The past tense sounded like a stab. They're laughing. About what? About me. Gabriel moved on the sofa, adjusted his posture. The sound of the pants fabric rubbing against each other seemed thunderously clear to me. I could hear my own heart, a frantic and terrified drum in my chest. Blood rushed to my temples, a deafening buzz that threatened to drown out my sister's voice. "It has to be someone who looks like him," I said, but it was a plea, not a statement. A desperate prayer thrown to a god I no longer believed in. A double, a coincidence. "He's wearing the jacket, Hada." Lila's voice broke in a sob. "And the suitcase. The silver Rimowa suitcase. The one with the Iceland flag sticker in the corner. I see it. My God, I see it." The suitcase. We had bought it together for our anniversary trip to Rome. The sticker was put on by the bed and breakfast manager in Reykjavik, a big rosy guy who recommended a restaurant where we ate the best fish of our lives. Gabriel had said that sticker would be his lucky charm forever. Forever. The word echoed hollow in my skull. I felt a sudden vertigo. The kitchen, my kingdom of white tiles and pine furniture, began to tilt. I pressed my sweaty palm on the cold surface of the marble to keep from falling. My fingers found the edge of the sauce-stained spoon. Reality was here. It was this man on my sofa. It was the smell of food. The other one, Leela's, was a nightmare, a grotesque mistake. Wait for me. Don't hang up. My sister's voice was a thread. I'm going to get closer. You won't believe me. I'm going to call him. No. The scream came out dry, visceral. Don't call him. But it was too late. I heard the background noise of the airport intensify. Distant voices announcing flights in English. The murmur of the crowd. The screech of a luggage cart. I heard Leela's accelerated breathing. The quick clicking of her steps on the shiny floor. And then through the phone, weak but clear, like a poisoned dart that crossed oceans and continents to find me, I heard his voice. Gabriel. It was Lila's scream, sharp, charged with an urgency that cut through the air. And then a silence. A micro-silence charged with the electricity of the inevitable. And then another voice. A voice I knew better than my own. That had whispered "I love you" in my ear. In the dim light of our bedroom. That had sung defiantly and out of tune, "Happy birthday" to our daughter last month. That had promised me with tears in his eyes that he would never leave me alone. That voice that was the sound of my home. Lila, what the hell are you doing here? There was no doubt. There was no possible ambiguity. It was him. It was Gabriel. At that instant I heard the door open behind me. The creak of the upper hinge, the one that always protested, and that Gabriel had been promising to oil for 3 years, sounded like a shriek in the sepulchral silence of the house. The sound pierced through me, physical, painful. I turned around, and there he was. Gabriel. Standing in the doorframe that connected the hall with the kitchen. In his gray sweatpants. Barefoot. With an expression of slight surprise on his face seeing me standing rigid, with the phone glued to my ear like a statue of salt. "Honey, is something wrong?" he asked. His voice was warm, familiar, terribly normal. "I heard you scream." Everything contracted and expanded at once. The entire universe fit in the 3 meters that separated the countertop from the door. The air thickened until it became unbreathable. I no longer felt my legs. I no longer felt my heart. I only felt a glacial cold that spread from the center of my chest to every extremity, freezing everything. Hada, are you there?" Lila's voice, tiny and terrified, came from the receiver as if from the bottom of a well. "Did you hear him? My God, Hada, answer me." Gabriel took a step inside, frowning. His eyes, those hazel eyes that had looked at me so many times with love, with humor, with complicity, now scrutinized my face looking for an answer. "Who are you talking to?" he asked. And his tone was one of genuine curiosity, slightly worried. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My brain, that organ that was supposed to process information, seek logic, find an explanation, had become a seized engine, emitting thick black smoke that wouldn't let me see, that wouldn't let me think. 2 Gabriels, one in London, one here. One boarding a plane with a blonde woman, one standing in our kitchen, smelling of home, of security, of lies. "Hada, please." Lila's voice was a whimper. "Tell me something." My mouth opened but no sound came out. Just a light wheeze, that of a cornered animal. Gabriel took another step forward. His gaze dropped to the sauce stain on my blouse. "Oh, you stained yourself. Did you drop the spoon?" he said, and sketched a small smile, the same smile with which he always consoled me for my small domestic disasters. It was such an intimate gesture, so ours that in that context of absolute madness it was so obscene that I felt nauseous. "Who is it?" I managed to mumble at last. The voice didn't sound like mine. It was hoarse, rough, lacerated. "Who is what, honey?" he asked, stopping a meter from me. His expression was one of perfect, impeccable confusion. There wasn't a hint of guilt, panic or surprise. Nothing. Just the loving concern of a husband who sees his wife pale and trembling in the middle of the kitchen. The disconnection was so violent that for a second I doubted my own sanity. Had I imagined it? Had it been an auditory hallucination? Was I having a nervous breakdown? But then Lila's voice, tenacious, insistent, emerged from the phone. "Talk to him, Hada." Ask him where he is. Ask him what he's doing at Heathrow. Gabriel must have heard the murmur. His gaze went to the phone in my hand, and for a fraction of a second, something flickered in his eyes. Something quick, elusive, like a fish shadow in the depths of a pond. So quick, I almost missed it. Almost. Is it Lila? He asked, and his tone changed slightly. A note of caution? Annoyance? Is something wrong? She sounds upset. Yes. It's Lila, I said, and each word cost superhuman effort. She's at Heathrow. I watched his face. I looked for the slightest tick, the slightest blink, the slightest contraction of the jaw muscle. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Oh yeah? Is she going somewhere? He asked, and came a little closer, until he could take the stained spoon from the countertop. He examined it with distraction before taking it to the sink and rinsing it under the tap. The water ran, an everyday mundane sound that clashed with the apocalyptic storm that roared inside me. His back was toward me. Relaxed. Too relaxed. Yes, I whispered. She saw you. He turned off the tap. The silence was abrupt. He remained still with his back to me, for 2 seconds that stretched like 2 eternities. Then he turned slowly, drying his hands on his pants. Me, he asked, and an eyebrow arched in an expression of amused skepticism. Impossible, honey. I've been here all afternoon, since I came back from the gym. He smiled. A wide, carefree smile. Unless I have a double. Do you think I have a double? He joked. He joked. The real world, that of my kitchen, pushed with all its strength to impose itself. It was him. He was here. He smelled of his shower gel, that cedar and lemon scent that impregnated the bathroom towels. I could see the small shaving cut he had next to his lower lip. I could see the sock mark on his ankle. He was tangible. He was real. Was he real? Lila's voice was a thread of panic in my ear. Don't believe him, Hada. He's lying. I saw him. I talked to him. She says, I said, and swallowed saliva, forcing the words through a throat that was pure sandpaper. She says she talked to you, that you boarded flight BA 288 to Boston, with a woman. This time the reaction was different. Not one of surprise or denial. His smile faded, but it wasn't replaced by panic, but by an expression of deep and genuine concern. For me, he approached, slow, cautious, as if approaching a frightened animal. Honey, he said, and his voice was soft. Honeyed, the voice he used to calm me when I had nightmares. Hada, my love. Are you okay? He touched my arm. His hand was large, warm, familiar. The contact electrified me. It was the most real and most false contact I had felt in my life. I wanted to pull away, but my muscles didn't respond. I was paralyzed. I don't feel well, I murmured. And it was the absolute truth. Lila is wrong, he affirmed with crushing tranquility. His eyes didn't leave mine. They were deep, serene. There was no ocean of lies in them, only loving concern. Or she's playing a very bad taste joke on you. Have you been sleeping well lately? You've been very stressed with the work project. He was redirecting me. Gently, lovingly, as he had done so many times when I obsessed over something. Aren't you exaggerating, my love? Aren't you very tired? He was a master in the art of benevolent gaslighting, and I had always forgiven him because I believed he did it for my own good, to protect me from my own anxiety. Now that same tactic made me nauseous. I'm not stressed, I said, but it sounded weak, whiny, like the hysterical woman he was subtly painting. Of course you are. He insisted, caressing my arm with his thumb. His touch was torture. You've had headaches for weeks. And Lila, well, you know how Lila is. She's dramatic. She loves creating stories. Do you remember when she told us she had seen our neighbor putting a corpse in the trunk, and it turned out to be a mannequin for a shop window? It was true. Lila had an overflowing imagination and a tendency to exaggeration. But this wasn't that. I had heard her voice. I had heard the fear, the authentic panic. She called you, Gabriel. I said, fixing my gaze on his, challenging his narrative, clinging to that single thread of reality I had left. She called you by name, and you responded. He sighed, an exhalation of patience and tenderness. He shook his head gently. Hada, my life. I don't know what Lila said she heard, but I haven't been at any airport. I've been here, watching television. You can check the Netflix history, Steel Giants Minute 32. He smiled again, a sad smile. Do you really think I could be in two places at once? What am I, a superhero? His logic was impeccable, irrefutable, and yet each of his words, each gesture of concern, each caress, each smile, was driving me crazy, because I trusted Leela, and I had heard his voice on the other side of the phone. Let me talk to her. He proposed calmly. Let me talk to my sister-in-law and clear up this misunderstanding once and for all. He extended his hand toward the phone. His movement was slow, not a grab, but an offer of help, a solution. And at that moment, something in me broke. The passivity, the paralysis became something more primal. Instinct, pure survival instinct. I jerked the phone back, pressing it against my chest like it was a talisman. The only proof that I wasn't completely crazy. No, I said, and my voice sounded firmer than I expected. His hand stopped in the air. The expression on his face changed. The mask of loving concern cracked. Just a little, just for 1,000th of a second, letting something else show through. Frustration, fatigue, irritation, it was so quick that again I doubted. But this time the doubt didn't paralyze me. It alerted me. Hedda, this is silly, he said, and his tone was a little drier, a little less honeyed. Give me the phone, let's fix this. What is there to fix? I asked, defiant. If you haven't been there, there's nothing to fix. Exactly, he nodded, regaining composure, patience. That's exactly why. Give me the phone and I'll tell her. That way you'll be calm. He took another step forward. We were almost face to face now. I could feel the heat of his body. I could see each of his pores. It was him, my husband. The man I had shared a decade of my life with. The father of my daughter. And at that moment he seemed like the most absolute stranger I had ever known. Hada, for God's sake? Lila's voice, desperate, emerged muffled from where I pressed the phone against my chest. What's happening? Gabriel must have heard her. His eyes went down to the phone and then back to mine. There was no trace of the sad smile anymore. His face was a serene mask, but his eyes had changed. They were no longer deep and serene. They were flat. Opaque, like those of a fish. Okay, he said, and his voice was now completely neutral, cold. Let's do it another way. He stepped back. He put his hand in his sweatpants pocket and took out his mobile phone. He unlocked it with a quick movement of his thumb. Let's call Leela, he proposed, and his finger hovered over the screen. Let's call her together. From my phone. That way you can hear the conversation through both speakers. Okay, does that seem right to you? He looked at me, waiting for my answer. It was a master move, so rational, so sensible, so Gabriel. If he called and Lila said she was at Heathrow, it would be her word against his, and he was here with me, tangible. Who was I going to believe? My dramatic and absent sister, or my husband, who looked at me with those honest eyes and offered me a solution? But if he called and Lila, from the other side of the world, said she had him in front of her, then, what? What the hell was the thing I had in front of me then? I nodded slowly, unable to articulate a word. He smiled, a small smile of contained triumph. He looked for Lila's contact in his agenda. He found it, he pressed the call button. And then it happened. Just as his finger was about to touch the screen, the phone on my chest, mine, the one still connected to Lila, vibrated. A short, dull vibration. Gabriel stopped. His gaze fixed on my phone. And his, in his hand, emitted a sound. Not Lila's ringtone, but a metallic ping, sharp, a notification. A WhatsApp notification. The vibration on my chest and the ping in his hand had been perfectly simultaneous. The air held in my lungs. Gabriel didn't move. His gaze fixed on the phone I was hiding against my chest, was intense, calculating. Too intense. What was that? I asked, and my voice was barely a whisper. Nothing, he replied too quickly. A bank notification, they always come at this time. But it wasn't the tone of bank notifications. I knew it was the sound of a WhatsApp message. And the vibration on my phone had been the alert of an incoming message. Leela wouldn't have hung up on me to send me a message. She'd be terrified, waiting for my response. Unless, my fingers, numb from the cold, moved of their own will. I slowly lowered the phone from my chest. Gabriel made an infinitesimal movement forward, as if to prevent me, but stopped. I looked at the screen. The call with Leela was still active. 7:34 minutes, but just below in the notification bar there was a new message, from Gabriel. From his number. From the phone he was holding in his hand. My heart gave such a violent lurch, that I thought I would faint. I looked up at him. His expression was impenetrable. But he was no longer trying to smile. He was no longer trying to look worried. He just looked at me, waiting. With an uncontrollable tremor in my fingers, I slid down the notification bar. And there it was. A message from Gabriel, sent 10 seconds ago. It wasn't a text. It was a photograph. The preview was small, blurry, but I could make it out. It was a photo of a television screen. In it you could see a huge ship, an oil tanker, in dry dock, and in the lower right corner, minute 32:17 of a documentary, Steel Giants. And below the photo a single text message. For Lila, proof that I'm at home, and that my wife is having an anxiety crisis. Please don't tell her anything. I'll take care of calming her down myself. I read the message. Once, twice. The letters danced before my eyes. Black on white background, cruel in their simplicity, in their diabolical ingenuity. He hadn't called to talk. He had called for this, to create the perfect alibi. To paint me as the unhinged, stressed wife who imagined things. So that Leela, upon receiving the photo and the message, would doubt her own senses. So she would think, poor Hada, she's so bad that Gabriel has to send me proof to reassure me. I looked up very slowly. I no longer trembled. The cold inside me had solidified into a smooth, hard, and perfectly clear block of ice. He was still there, with his phone in his hand. He knew what I had just seen. He knew, and finally the mask fell completely. There was no dramatic confession. There was no gesture of guilt. Just a slight, almost imperceptible shrug. A small gesture of "that's it, you caught me." But in his eyes there was no remorse. There was resignation, annoyance, fatigue from having to maintain the farce. "It was you," I said. It was no longer a question. It was a statement, a fact. The only truth in a world of lies. He didn't respond. There was no need. "Who is she?" I asked, and my voice sounded flat, dead. "Hada, this isn't the time," he said, and for the first time his voice sounded tired. Authentically tired. "Who is she?" The scream tore my throat, came from a dark and primitive place I didn't know. It was a howl of pure pain, of rage, of absolute betrayal. On the phone I heard Leela's inconsolable crying. "Hada." Gabriel didn't flinch. He held my gaze, and then his lips moved. "It's Alicia." The name fell between us like a slab. Alicia, Alicia, Alicia. I mentally went through every Alicia we knew. His work friend's cousin, the physiotherapist who treated his back last year, the new intern in his department. Alicia, a common name. A name that now tasted like poison. "Alicia who?" I insisted. My voice trembled again, but now it was with rage. "Since when?" "Hada, please," he whispered, and something in his tone, a hint of authentic anguish, stopped me. "Don't do this, not now." "What? What shouldn't I do?" I spat the words. "What shouldn't I ask why my husband has a double, a clone, a fucking hologram that's about to go to Boston with another woman while you're here pretending to worry about me? Is that what I shouldn't do?" I advanced toward him. I no longer felt fear. I felt an incandescent fury, a pain so sharp it was almost physical. "How? How is it possible, Gabriel? Tell me how." I screamed and my fists clenched at my sides. He closed his eyes for a second. When he opened them, there was deep, real sadness in them. But I don't know if it was for me, for him, or for the simple fact of having been discovered. "It's my brother," he said at last. And his voice was barely a thread of voice. The world truly stopped this time. All the noise, the buzzing, the fury, everything went silent. There was absolute, empty silence, like there must be in interstellar space. "You're, what?" I managed to stammer. "My brother," he repeated, and lowered his gaze to the floor, unable to hold my sight. My twin brother Hada. His name is Tomas. The words made no sense. They floated in the air like soap bubbles, unbreakable, surreal. You don't have a brother, I said, and it sounded stupid because it was the most fundamental truth I knew about him. You're an only child. Your parents died in a car accident 15 years ago. You don't have family. It was his story, the tragedy that had defined him. The reason why our family, the one we had created together, was so important to him. I had cried with him on the anniversary of their death. I had visited their grave in his hometown cemetery. There was no one else. He was alone in the world. Until he met me. Gabriel, or was it Tomas, raised his head. His eyes were full of tears. Real tears. I did have them, he whispered. Them, and him. Are you saying that? That you've lied to me for 10 years? I asked. And each word was a knife that twisted in my entrails. About something like that. About who you are. I haven't lied about who I am, he replied with a burst of passion. I am Gabriel. I'm your husband, Sophia's father. That's the only real thing, Hada. The only thing. And him, I screamed, pointing at the phone, as if on the other side was the specter of his double. Who is he? He's my brother, he shouted, and for the first time I saw panic, authentic desperation on his face. It's complicated, Hada. You wouldn't understand. Do me the favor of trying to make me understand. I bellowed, and the tears finally flowed, hot, salty, unstoppable, streaming down my cheeks. Tell me why. Why is there a man identical to you boarding a plane, and why have you hidden his existence from me? He ran a hand through his hair, desperate. He took a deep breath, trying to compose himself. We were separated as children. He began speaking quickly, as if he wanted to get it out of himself. After the accident, it wasn't a car accident, Hada, it was a fire. At home, my parents died. We survived, but we were small. We had no family. The protection system separated us. He was taken by a family to the United States. I had to stay here in foster care. We lost contact. I swore I wouldn't talk about him. That it was too painful. I preferred to think he was dead. It was easier. And when? I asked, trembling from head to toe. 2 years ago, he admitted, and guilt finally appeared in his eyes. He located me through social networks. We started talking, little by little. He hasn't had an easy life. His foster family wasn't good. He has problems. I've been trying to help him, financially, emotionally. Help him? I repeated, and a bitter, hysterical laugh sprouted from my lips. Help him with what? To impersonate you. To take your lover to Boston. Alicia isn't my lover, he shouted. And this time, the vehemence in his voice sounded real. Heartbreaking. She's his girlfriend. She's Tomas's girlfriend. The revelation hit me with the force of a hammer. I staggered backward, leaning on the countertop to keep from falling. The sauce was burning. It smelled of carbonized tomato, a sour, bitter smell that mixed with the sweet perfume of betrayal. His girlfriend, I murmured. Yes, he nodded, exhausted. They met here the last time Tomas came to visit, 6 months ago. She thinks he's me. She thinks he's Gabriel. The ground opened beneath my feet. Each word was another layer of lies, another dimension of deception that surpassed the previous one in perversity and complexity. What? It was all I could say. Tomas is obsessed with my life. He confessed, and tears ran freely down his face now. With our life, with what we have. He has nothing. Nothing. He asked to borrow my identity for a few days. He said he wanted to show Alicia a good life. That he wanted to impress her. Take her to Boston, to a medical conference I was supposed to have attended. I made up an excuse not to go. He impersonates me. He uses my passport, my boarding pass, everything. And your jacket? I asked, stunned. Your suitcase. I lent it to him, he whispered. I thought it was the least I could do. After everything that's happened. After having such a fucked up life while I had you. He looked at me pleading, as if expecting understanding, pity. As if his confession, instead of horrifying me, would generate a wave of compassion in me for the poor twin brother with a difficult life. But I only felt visceral disgust. A horror so deep it left me breathless. And Lila? I asked. My voice was a distant echo. Were you going to let her think I was crazy? Were you going to send her that fake proof to make her doubt me? I had to do it, he implored. I couldn't risk you finding out. Not like this. I was going to tell you, Hada, I swear. When Tomas returned, when everything was over, I was going to find a way. Shut up, I roared, covering my ears like a child. Shut up, I don't want to hear more lies. They're not lies, he shouted, advancing toward me. It's the truth, I'm telling you everything. Please, Hada, look at me. It's me, I'm your husband. I don't know you. I sobbed, backing away. I don't know who you are. You've lived a double life for years. You've had a twin brother and you've hidden him from me. You've lied, and manipulated, and made me believe I was going crazy. The sound of my crying and Lila's, who was still on the phone, formed a heartbreaking chorus. Gabriel stopped, defeated, seeing the damage. Seeing how his house of cards, so carefully constructed, was falling apart and burying me under the rubble. And what else? I asked, with a broken voice. What other things have you hidden from me, Gabriel? What other brothers? What other lives? What other Alicias are out there? There's nothing else. He swore with his hands extended. I swear it on Sophia, this is everything. It's just, Tomas. Sophia. Our daughter. Our 7-year-old daughter. Who at that moment was at a friend's house, sleeping unaware that her world was cracking. Mentioning her was another low blow. He was using our purest, most sacred love to defend his mountain of lies. At that moment the doorbell rang. A cheerful, innocent sound, the melodic chime we had chosen together at a craft fair. So normal, so everyday, so brutally out of place. Gabriel and I remained paralyzed, looking at each other across the kitchen, across the years, across the deception. Tears continued to run down my face. The sauce stain on my blouse looked like a bullet wound. The doorbell rang again. Insistent. Who could it be? We weren't expecting anyone. It was late. Gabriel looked toward the hall, then at me. A shadow of panic crossed his face. A new, different panic. Don't open it, he said, and his voice was urgent, serious. Why? I asked, suspicious. Who is it? I don't know, but, he swallowed saliva. But Tomas sometimes comes without warning. When he has problems. The idea that the thing that was at the airport, the double, the twin, could be on the other side of that door, chilled my blood. The doorbell rang for the third time, long, impatient. And then a voice. A woman's voice. Sweet, familiar, that pierced through the wood and arrived clearly to the kitchen. Hada, Gabriel, are you there? I've come to give you a surprise. I recognized the voice instantly. It was a voice that had rocked my childhood. That had sung me lullabies, that had consoled me in my first heartbreaks. A voice that represented warmth, security, unconditional love. It was my mother's voice. Gabriel paled. His gaze met mine, and in his eyes there were no longer lies, no excuses, no strategies, only terror. Pure terror. Don't open it, he repeated. And this time it was a desperate plea. Please, Hada, don't open the door. But it was too late. My feet, moved by an instinct deeper than reason, stronger than pain, were already heading toward the hall, toward the doorbell that kept ringing, toward my mother's voice, toward the truth that, I intuited with my heart shattered, was even more terrible than I could imagine. My feet moved before my brain, tangled in the web of horrors that Gabriel had just unleashed, could process a coherent order. The instinct of a lifetime, the conditioned reflex of responding to my mother's call, was stronger than fear. Stronger than betrayal, stronger than the glacial cold that ran through my veins. Hada, no. Gabriel's voice was a rough whisper, charged with a panic that made my skin crawl. But it was too late. My fingers, still trembling, tightly closed the phone, abruptly cutting the connection with Lila's heartbreaking crying. The disconnection sounded like a door slam in the loaded silence of the house. I took 2 hesitant steps toward the hall, moving away from him, from his lie, from his phantom twin brother. My mother's voice pierced through the door again, sweet and slightly worried. Everything okay? I heard screaming. Can't you hear me? I came by taxi from the airport to surprise you. The airport. The word hit me like a lash. My gaze fixed on Gabriel, who had remained pale, motionless in the center of the kitchen, like a cornered animal that sees its predator approaching. His terror was tangible, and for some reason my mind couldn't yet understand that terror was infinitely more terrifying than his confession. The doorbell repeated, more insistent. "I'm coming," I managed to shout, and my voice sounded hoarse, strange, as if it didn't belong to me. I walked down the short hallway that connected the kitchen with the hall. Each step resonated in the oppressive silence. I could feel Gabriel's gaze nailed to my back, heavy pleading. The photographs on the wall, us on the beach in Cadiz, Sophia in her grandmother's arms the day of her baptism, Gabriel and I smiling under the Eiffel Tower, seemed to mock me, obscene reminders of a happiness that had never been real, or that at least had been rotten from the inside for years. I reached the door. My hand hovered over the knob, brass cold under my fingers. I hesitated. Gabriel's plea echoed in my ears. "Don't open it." Why? What was behind that warning? What new abyss would open now? Hada, my mother's voice, now just on the other side, sounded lower, tinged with genuine concern. "Honey, is something wrong?" That concern, that maternal tone that had been my refuge for 35 years, broke the last vestiges of my resistance. I turned the knob and opened the door. And there she was. Margarita, my mother, with her favorite beige coat, her brown hair pulled back in a bun slightly disheveled by the trip, and her small wheeled suitcase beside her. In one hand she held a box of pastries from the bakery that Sophia liked. Her face, lined by the smiles of a lifetime, was marked with worry. Her brown eyes, so similar to mine, scrutinized me looking for an answer. "Mom," the word came out like a stifled sob. Her gaze swept over my tear-soaked face, stopped at the sauce stain on my blouse, and then slipped over my shoulder, toward the interior of the house. Her expression of concern transformed into something deeper, darker. It wasn't surprise. It was recognition, resignation. "My God, Hada," she whispered, and dropped the pastry box on the hall floor. Her hands, cold from outside, took hold of mine. "What happened?" I tried to speak, but only a guttural sound came out, the whimper of a wounded animal. I shook my head, unable to articulate the monstrosity that had just occurred. She drew me to her and wrapped me in a hug. Her perfume of jasmine and talcum powder, the aroma of my childhood, hit me with an emotional force that almost doubled my knees. I clung to her as I had clung as a child after a nightmare, burying my face in her coat, sobbing against her shoulder. There, honey, there," she murmured, stroking my hair. "Mom is here." But her voice, although reassuring, sounded tense. And her eyes didn't close. They looked over my shoulder toward the kitchen where I knew Gabriel was still standing. I felt her body rigid, alert. "Margarita." Gabriel's voice sounded from the kitchen threshold. It was flat, devoid of all emotion, like that of an automaton. My mother slowly released me. She kept one hand on my shoulder, as if anchoring me to reality, and looked up to look at him. The air between them charged with electricity so dense I could taste it, metallic, on my palate. "Gabriel," she named him, and it wasn't a greeting, it was an accusation, a sentence. "What are you doing here?" he asked. His tone wasn't one of surprise at the unexpected visit. It was one of annoyance. "Warning. It seems I've arrived at just the right moment. As always." My mother replied, and her voice had an edge I had never heard from her, an edge of ice. "You hear your wife crying, and you stand there like a fool. Aren't you going to do anything?" Gabriel didn't flinch. He didn't blush. He didn't lower his gaze. He simply observed her. And in his eyes there was a mute challenge, a silent war being waged between them, and of which I, until that moment, had been completely oblivious. "Hada and I were talking," he said, measuring each word. "It's a private matter." From the screaming I heard from the street, it didn't seem like a very private conversation. She replied, squeezing my shoulder. "It seems more like all your lies are finally being aired." I separated from her a little, looking at her and Gabriel alternately. What was happening? What was this tension? This hostile familiarity? "Mom, what?" I started to say, confused. She didn't look at me. Her attention was completely focused on Gabriel, like a hawk stalking its prey. "Which one is it this time, Gabriel?" my mother asked, and her icy voice contrasted brutally with the warmth of her hug moments before. The impossible client who forces you to work late. The last-minute business trip, or have you devised a new one? I froze. My mother's words resonated in the hall, each one of them a fragment of my life, of my own drowned doubts, of the excuses I had always accepted because I trusted him. Margarita, this is not the time. Gabriel's voice was a low, dangerous warning. I think it's the perfect time. She raised her voice for the first time and the sound made me shudder. I've been quiet for years for her sake, so as not to destroy her happiness. But enough is enough. It's over, Gabriel. Quiet? I screamed, freeing myself from her hand, and taking a step back, looking at her as if she were a stranger. Quiet about what? What do you know? My mother finally looked at me, and in her eyes I saw such deep pain that it left me breathless. I also saw fear, and immense guilt. Honey, she whispered, and her voice broke. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. What are you sorry for? I insisted, and my own pain began to transform into growing rage, now directed at her. What do you know? Gabriel took a step forward. Hada, don't listen to her, he said, and now his tone was the usual one, that of loving concern, but it sounded false, forced, like a bad performance. Your mother has never approved of me. She's always tried to create obstacles between us. This is just another one of her tactics. Liar! My mother's scream thundered in the closed space of the hall. She pointed at Gabriel with a trembling finger. You and your double life. You and your trips. You and your brother. The world stopped again. The air thickened until it became unbreathable. What? I managed to articulate, looking at my mother with wide eyes. She looked at me, and tears began to run down her cheeks. I know, Hada, she confessed, and each word was a dagger for both of us. I've known for 2 years. The revelation was so violent, so unexpected that the floor literally moved under my feet. I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. The fresh paint, a cotton color we had chosen together, suddenly seemed grotesque, ridiculous to me. How? It was all I could say. I followed him, she admitted, her voice laden with shame. Once when you came home and he said he had to go back to the office. I had my suspicions, things that didn't add up. Small lies. I followed him to an apartment in the Salamanca neighborhood. And I saw him come down with him. With Tomas? I asked, and the name tasted like ash in my mouth. My mother nodded, crying silently. They're identical. It's terrifying. Gabriel emitted a broken sound, a mixture of rage and defeat. He leaned against the kitchen doorframe, as if he suddenly lacked strength. And why? I screamed, addressing both of them. Neither. Why didn't you tell me, Mom? You let me live a lie for 2 years. Because I wanted to protect you, she implored, extending her hands toward me. He asked me to. He swore it was temporary, that his brother had problems, that he was just helping him. He told me that if I told you it would destroy your world, that you would collapse. And I saw you so happy, Sophia, so happy. I couldn't be the one to take that away from you. And you preferred to let me live with a liar. The scream tore my throat. You preferred to be an accomplice. I was going to tell you, Gabriel shouted, standing up. I swear, Hada, I was going to find a way. Both of you shut up, I roared, covering my ears. I don't want to hear more. I don't want to know more. The silence fell suddenly, heavy, uncomfortable, broken only by my mother's sobs and my own labored breathing. The three of us were in the hall, forming a perfect triangle of pain, betrayal and secrets. Gabriel broke the silence first. His voice was tired, defeated. And what are you doing here now, Margarita? Have you come to finish the job? My mother wiped her tears with the back of her hand. A fierce determination lit up her face. I came because Leila called me, she announced, and her words fell like stones in a calm pond. Gabriel and I stared at her, paralyzed. Lila? I asked, confused. Yes. My mother nodded. After talking to you, she was hysterical. She didn't know what to do. She called me. She told me what she had seen, what she had heard. She looked at Gabriel with contempt. About the photo, the message, everything. My God, I murmured, imagining my sister's anguish trapped between the evidence of her eyes and the irrefutable proof that Gabriel had sent her. And then my mother continued, and her tone became somber. She told me something else, something she didn't think was important. But that to me, chilled my blood. Gabriel tensed. I saw his fists clench at his sides. His gaze became evasive, frightened. What? I asked, looking at my mother. What did she tell you? My mother looked at me, and in her eyes there was terrible pity, as if what she was going to tell me was going to hurt me even more than everything before. She said that when she called him, she pointed at Gabriel with her head. At the airport, and he turned around, she noticed something on his face. What? I insisted, impatient, my heart beating 1,000 times per hour. She said he had a scar. My mother pronounced the words slowly, deliberately. A small, thin scar right here. She touched the arch of her left eyebrow. I instinctively looked at Gabriel, at his left eyebrow, impeccable, smooth, without any scar. And, I asked, not understanding. Tomas must have a scar that Gabriel doesn't have. That makes sense. If they were raised separately. Yes, my mother nodded. That's what I thought at first. But then I remembered something. Her gaze fixed on Gabriel, accusatory, definitive. I remembered the first time I saw you, Gabriel. When Hada brought you home to meet us. You had a scar. Right there, on your left eyebrow. You fell off your bike as a child. Remember? You told us. A scar that stayed with you forever. Time contracted. Expanded, ceased to exist. My eyes returned to Gabriel's eyebrow. Smooth. Impeccable. No. I whispered, shaking my head, backing up until I hit the front door cold through my thin blouse. No. Yes, my mother insisted. Her voice trembling but clear. You had that scar, Gabriel. You had it when you met Hada. You had it when you got married. You had it when Sophia was born. She paused, swallowing. But a few years ago, you stopped having it. Gabriel said nothing. He had gone livid. His breathing was shallow, rapid. It was the breathing of someone who had been cornered. What are you saying, Mom? I asked, although deep down in the deepest part of my soul, I was beginning to understand it. And that understanding was so monstrous that my mind refused to accept it. I'm saying Hada. And my mother was crying again, but now with rage, with impotence, that the man Lila saw at the airport, the one getting on the plane with another woman, wasn't Tomas. She pointed with a trembling finger at the man who was in front of us. The man I had shared my life, my bed, my daughter with. That one, she said, with a voice that left no room for doubt, that one is Tomas. The entire world exploded in a silent, devastating implosion. There was no sound, no screaming, just the deafening buzz of absolute, horrible, undeniable truth, crashing into me with the force of a meteorite. Everything fit. The scar I vaguely remembered, which had disappeared after a small cosmetic surgery intervention after a minor accident. His refusal to talk about his past. His twin brother, with a difficult life. The ease with which he lied. Everything. Gabriel wasn't Gabriel. The man in front of me, the one who had hugged me that morning. The one who had read Sophia a story last night. The one who had sworn to love me forever, was Tomas. And the one on the plane, the one with the scar, the one who had built a life with me for 10 years, was the real Gabriel. I collapsed. Not physically. My legs held up, but inside I collapsed. My entire being, my identity, my past, my present, everything was reduced to ashes in a nanosecond. I was no longer Hada, the wife, the mother. I was an empty shell, a receptacle of pain so vast and so deep that it had no name. Hada. Tomas's voice, or should I call him Gabriel? Who was he? Was a thread of voice, a whimper. Please. I looked up at him, and for the first time I saw beyond the mask. I saw the fear, the desperation, the misery. I saw the imposter, the impersonator. I saw the man who had stolen his brother's life, who had stolen me. Where is he? I asked, and my voice didn't sound human. It sounded like broken glass, like twisted metal. Where is my husband? Tomas, it had to be Tomas, lowered his gaze. He couldn't hold mine. In Boston, he murmured. With her, with Alicia. Who is Alicia? I asked. But I already knew. I knew it in the depths of my soul. His lover. He confessed, and the word fell like a brick between us. They've been together for 2 years. The last piece of the puzzle fit with a sinister click. The lover wasn't Tomas's, she was Gabriel's. The real Gabriel's. My real husband had been unfaithful to me. For 2 years, and his twin brother, the outcast, the wretch, had been sent to cover his back, to impersonate him here at home, with me, while he went on trips with his lover. My God. My mother gasped, putting a hand to her mouth as if she were going to vomit. It's incredible. He forced me. Tomas looked at my mother, pleading. He blackmailed me. He said that if I didn't help him, if I didn't cover for him here, he would tell about what I did. What you did? I asked, with chilling calm. Tomas fell silent, he pressed his lips together. What did he blackmail you with, Tomas? My mother insisted, taking a step toward him, her voice laden with contained fury. What have you done? He didn't answer. He just shook his head again and again like a cornered child. And then a new sound burst into the tension of the hall. It wasn't the doorbell. It wasn't a scream. It was the soft click-clack of a key turning in the front door lock. The door I was leaning against. The three of us froze. The keys. Only 3 people had keys to this house. Gabriel, me, and the door opened inward, gently pushing me. I turned slowly, my heart turned into a fist of ice. And there in the doorframe, with a travel suitcase and an expression of fatigue and surprise on his face, was him. Gabriel. The real Gabriel. He wore the navy blue jacket. He had a small scar, thin and white, on the arch of his left eyebrow, and his eyes. Those eyes I loved, first rested on me, pale and stained with tears and sauce, then on my mother, tearful and furious, and finally on himself, on his double, on his brother. His expression of surprise transformed into incredulity, then into annoyance, and finally into cold, calculating fury. What the hell is going on here? He asked. And his voice, the voice I had heard whisper, I love you for a decade, sounded like that of a complete stranger to the drama he had created. And I knew with a certainty that froze my soul, that our hell had just begun. The silence that followed Gabriel's question was absolute, dense, like the moment of calm in the eye of a hurricane. The word police hung in the air, heavy and ominous, like the echo of a shot that had not yet been fired. The 4 of us, Gabriel, Tomas, my mother and I, became statues trapped in a tableau vivant of terror and suspended revelation. The masculine voice repeated from the other side of the door, firmer this time. Mr. Vasquez, we're from the Technological Investigation Brigade. Please open. Technological Investigation Brigade. The words meant nothing to me, but I saw how Gabriel's face, the one with the scar, the one with the suitcase, the real one completely decomposed. Color left his cheeks, leaving them an ashen gray. His jaw tensed until it seemed the bones were going to pierce his skin. The panic he showed then wasn't that of a man surprised in a marital lie. It was the panic of a man who sees the end approaching. Tomas, on the other hand, seemed to experience the opposite reaction. A strange, almost resigned calm took over his features. The tension in his shoulders dissipated a little. He nodded to himself, as if a long-feared prediction had finally come true. Gabriel, he whispered, and it was the first time I heard him call his brother by name. It's over. Gabriel didn't respond. His breathing was shallow, rapid, that of a cornered animal looking for an exit he knows doesn't exist. His eyes, feverish, swept the hall looking for something, anything. The officer called for the 3rd time. We have a search warrant. If you don't open, we'll proceed to force entry. Force entry. The idea of police bursting into my house, into Sophia's sanctuary, into the last vestige of my normal life, galvanized me. With a clumsy movement, I turned the knob and opened the door. On the threshold were 2 men. They weren't in uniform. They wore dark jackets and dress pants. They had credentials hanging around their necks that confirmed their belonging to the National Police. The one in front, a man of about 40 with short hair and a tired but penetrating gaze, showed me his badge. Good afternoon, I'm Inspector Valdez. Are you Mrs. Hada Vasquez? I nodded, unable to articulate a word. My mind was a whirlwind. Technological investigation. What could they want with Gabriel? Was it related to Auckland, to Tomas? Inspector Valdez looked beyond me, toward the interior of the hall. His gaze rested on the two identical men and stopped unfazed, as if he were used to seeing twins in domestic crisis scenes. His companion younger took out a folder and began leafing through documents. "We're looking for Gabriel Vasquez," Valdez said. His voice was neutral, professional. "We have a search warrant for the residence and a summons for interrogation." "Interrogation?" I managed to ask. "Why?" Gabriel took a step forward, trying to regain composure. He forced a tense smile. "Inspector, there must be a mistake. I'm Gabriel Vasquez. How can I help you?" Valdez observed him, then looked at Tomas, and again at Gabriel. He didn't seem impressed by the duplicity. "Mr. Vasquez, we're investigating a series of irregular bank transfers and digital identity impersonation activities linked to your tax number and your corporate accounts." His gaze was implacable. "Transfers totaling 1.2 million euros to various accounts in tax havens over the last 18 months. The air escaped from my lungs. 1.2 million euros. The figure was astronomical, surreal. I looked at Gabriel. He maintained the frozen smile, but a drop of sweat was sliding down his temple. "That's impossible," he said with a voice that pretended to be sure but sounded strangled. "It must be a bank error, or a hack." We followed the digital trail. Valdez interrupted, unperturbed. "The transfers were made from your personal computer, in your home outside work hours. Your security keys were used, your advanced digital signature, and we have witnesses who place you at the residence on the specific dates and times of the operations." He paused and added, with a calculated effect, "including your sister-in-law, Miss Lila Martinez, who saw you access the system on the night of October 12th, while you were supposedly watching a football match with her." Lila, my sister, the one who always defended Gabriel, the one who believed his lies. Had she seen him, and hadn't told me anything? Gabriel paled even more. He opened his mouth to say something, but no sound came out. It was then that Tomas spoke. His voice was clear, serene, laden with infinite fatigue. "It wasn't him, Inspector." We all turned to look at him. Gabriel did so with an expression of pure hatred. "It was me," Tomas confessed, and the words fell into the silence like stones in a pond. "I made the transfers. I used his computer, his keys, his identity." Inspector Valdez raised an eyebrow, interested but skeptical. "And who are you?" "I'm Tomas Vasquez, his twin brother," he said, and for the first time his voice sounded firm, without a trace of the anguish or fear from before. "And I've been living here, impersonating his identity for the last 2 years with his knowledge and consent." The confession, so direct, so brutal, left even the impassive inspector stunned. His companion stopped leafing through the folder and looked at Tomas with incredulity. "Consent?" Valdez asked. "Yes." Tomas nodded. He looked at his brother, and in his eyes there was no longer fear, only deep bitterness. "He forced me. He blackmailed me. He threatened to reveal what happened in Auckland if I didn't help him divert the money." Gabriel finally found his voice. "He's lying," he roared, lunging toward his brother. "He's a lunatic, a sick man. Don't believe him." The two officers immediately intervened, containing Gabriel with professional firmness. "Sir, calm down," Valdez said with a firm voice. "Or we'll have to proceed with coercive measures." Gabriel resisted for a moment, but the officer's strength was superior. He was panting with bloodshot eyes, looking at Tomas with an expression that promised death. "Auckland?" the inspector asked, turning to Tomas. "What are you referring to?" Tomas took a deep breath. He looked at me, and in his gaze there was a request for forgiveness, for understanding. "In Auckland," he began, and his voice trembled slightly. 5 years ago, there was a traffic accident. I was driving drunk. I hit a woman. She died." A gasp escaped from my mother's lips. I leaned against the wall, feeling my legs weaken. "An accident. A death. I fled," Tomas continued, tears running freely down his face now. "I didn't stop. I was a coward. I used Gabriel's passport, the Spanish passport, to leave the country before the New Zealand police could identify me." He swallowed with difficulty. Gabriel knew. He always knew, and he blackmailed me with it. He said that if I didn't help him in his plan, he would hand over the evidence he had to Interpol. He would send me to prison for decades. The story was so horrible, so twisted, that it was hard to process. Gabriel's double life. The impersonation, the embezzlement, and now, a fatal accident, a flight, blackmail between brothers. It was like a horror movie, but it was my life. Inspector Valdez watched Tomas carefully, evaluating his veracity. Do you have proof of what you say? Of this blackmail? Yes. Tomas replied, with determination. I have recordings, conversations, emails. I've been saving everything all this time just in case. They're on a USB memory hidden in his bedroom. He pointed at Gabriel, behind the headboard of the bed. Gabriel emitted a guttural sound of rage and impotent desperation. He collapsed against the wall, defeated. He knew it was the end. The inspector signaled to his companion, who nodded and headed toward the bedrooms. Inspector, Tomas said, with urgency, there's something else, something important. My niece Sophia is at daycare. Sick. He pointed at Gabriel was going to go get her. You can't allow it. He's not stable. Valdez nodded. Understanding. He took out his radio. Unit 7, proceed to Little Stars Daycare on Gran Via Street. Pick up minor Sofia Vázquez and await instructions. The mother will come later. Under no circumstances hand the child over to her father, Gabriel Vázquez. He has an imminent arrest warrant. The words arrest warrant echoed in my head. I looked at Gabriel. He was sunk with his head in his hands. The great manipulator, the architect of all this nightmare had fallen. But I didn't feel joy. Only an enormous emptiness, a black hole where my life used to be. The younger officer returned with a small black USB memory in his hand. I found it, Inspector. Right where he said. Valdez took it. Good. Tomas Vázquez, you'll also have to come with us to testify. For the moment you're an accomplice in a crime of embezzlement and identity impersonation. But your cooperation will be taken into account. He turned to Gabriel. Gabriel Vázquez, you're under arrest for embezzlement of public funds, identity impersonation, blackmail and covering up a crime of involuntary manslaughter and flight. Gabriel didn't protest. He said nothing. He allowed the younger officer to put handcuffs on him with chilling docility. The metal closing around his wrists was the most definitive sound I had heard in my life. The sound of the end. When they were taking him out of the hall, he stopped for a moment in front of me. He looked up, his eyes, the eyes I had loved, no longer had arrogance or contempt, only absolute emptiness. For Sophia, he whispered. Don't let, but he didn't finish the sentence. The officer gently pushed him forward toward the open door, toward the outside world where his life would completely crumble. I watched him get into the patrol car, head down, and knew it was the last time I would see the man I had married. The man who had never existed. Tomas, for his part, walked out with his head high, escorted but without handcuffs. Before leaving, he turned to me. I'm sorry, Hada, he said, and his voice was an echo of authentic pain. Really? I never wanted to hurt you. You or the girl. I nodded slowly. I couldn't forgive him. Not yet, but I understood, at some remote level, that he too had been a victim in all this. A victim who had made terrible mistakes, but a victim nonetheless. Auckland? I asked. With the last drop of strength I had left, was it really an accident? He held my gaze, and for the first time I saw something like peace in his eyes. Yes, he whispered. A terrible accident. And I've had to live with it every day. I'll pay for it. Now finally I'll pay for everything. And then he left. The door closed. My mother and I were left alone in the hall. The silence was absolute, broken only by the tick-tock of the wall clock and the soft hum of the kitchen fluorescent. The smell of burned sauce still permeated the air, a grotesque reminder of the normalcy that had existed just an hour ago. My mother slowly approached me. She said nothing, she simply hugged me, and for the first time since everything began, I let myself sink into her embrace. I let myself be carried away. The crying didn't come with violence, but with deep, infinite sadness, an ocean of pain from which I didn't know if I could ever emerge. Honey, it's over, she murmured, stroking my hair. It's over. Now it's time to rebuild. How? I sobbed against her shoulder. How do you rebuild 1.2 million euros? How do you rebuild 10 years of lies? How do I explain to my daughter that her father is a criminal, and that the man who read her stories was her uncle, a fugitive? I don't know, she admitted, and her voice was also laden with tears. But we'll do it, together. I'll help you, Hada. I'll do what I should have done 2 years ago. I'll protect you, you and Sophia. At that moment, my phone, which I was still holding in my hand, vibrated. It was a message from Inspector Valdez. Mrs. Vasquez, your daughter is safe. An officer has picked her up. She's being attended to by a doctor. She has a fever, but she's stable. You can come pick her up whenever you want, at the Central Police Station. We'll be waiting to take your statement. Courage. I showed the message to my mother. She nodded, wiping away her tears. Let's go, she said with renewed determination. Let's go get your daughter. She's the only real thing left. She's the only thing that matters now. She was right. In the midst of disaster, betrayal, monumental lies, there was a 7-year-old girl with fever who needed her mother. I nodded, drying my face with my sleeve. The gesture reminded me of the sauce stain, now dry and dark, on my blouse. Life continued, with its stains, its cracks, its wounds, but it continued. I took my coat from the rack. My mother did the same. We went out into the cold autumn night. The clean air hit my face, sweeping away for a moment the smell of burnt and deceit. I didn't look back. I didn't look at the house that had been my home, and was now just the scene of a nightmare. I walked toward my mother's car, with only one thought in mind, a beacon in the absolute darkness. Sophia. I was going for my daughter. 6 months later, the smell of fresh paint and wet soil from the new pots still floated in the air of the small living room. It wasn't the living room from before, with its designer furniture and leather sofa. This one was more modest, with second-hand furniture that my mother and I had patiently restored, and a comfortable fabric armchair where I liked to read to Sophia at night. The April afternoon light filtered through the window, illuminating the colorful drawings that Sophia had stuck on the refrigerator. I was in the kitchen, stirring noodle soup, Sophia's favorite, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the melodic doorbell from the old house. This was a simple functional doorbell, like our new life. I'll get it, Mom, Sophia shouted from her room. I heard the scurrying of her bare feet down the hallway. Only open if you see through the peephole that it's Grandma, I reminded her, with the usual knot of anxiety that formed in my stomach every time someone rang the doorbell. It's Grandma, she confirmed, and opened the door. My mother entered loaded with shopping bags, and a tired but genuine smile. I smell soup. Is it noodle soup? Yes, Grandma, Sophia said, hugging her waist. And then there's custard. Perfect, my mother said, winking at me over the girl's head. The last few months had been a whirlwind of police statements, court proceedings, therapy, and moves. The house was seized, along with almost all of Gabriel's assets, to begin compensating for the monumental embezzlement. The news had been a major scandal in financial circles and a torment in the tabloids for weeks. The phantom twin, the double crime, the perfect impersonation. The headlines still made me shudder. But inside our small rental apartment, we had built a bubble of calm, of new normalcy, a fractured normalcy. Yes, but authentic. And how was school today, my darling? My mother asked Sophia while leaving the bags on the counter. Good, Sophia replied, shrugging. We planted a bean in a jar, mine already has a stem. How exciting, my mother said with sincere interest. Sophia had accepted the changes with the brutal resilience of children. The simplified version we gave her. Dad did things he shouldn't have and has to be away for a while. And Uncle Tomas was helping us, but he also made mistakes, seemed to suffice for now. Therapy helped. And the fact that deep down the paternal figure in her life, the one who took her to the park and read her stories, had always been Tomas. A deeply damaged and misguided man, but one who, according to all evidence and confessions, genuinely loved her. It was a bitter and convoluted comfort, but it was comfort nonetheless. Gabriel was in preventive prison, awaiting trial. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Tomas's recordings, the digital trail, Lila's testimony about that October night. He pleaded not guilty at first, but the evidence was so overwhelming that he finally opted for a plea bargain. He acknowledged the charges of embezzlement and impersonation in exchange for not being charged with blackmail and covering up the Auckland accident. The prosecution accepted. New Zealand Justice had reopened the case of that woman's death, but it was a separate process. Tomas, for his part, fully cooperated with justice. His testimony was key. He admitted his guilt in the traffic accident, and his flight as well as his role in the embezzlement. He was sentenced to a lesser penalty in exchange for his collaboration and having his mitigating circumstances taken into account, the blackmail he was subjected to, and his psychological problems. He would serve his sentence in a minimum security facility. I saw him once, through glass, in court. He was gaunt, but in his eyes there was a peace I had never seen before, the peace of someone who finally had stopped running. He nodded toward me, a gesture of respect and apology. I couldn't return it. Not yet, maybe never. Leela was devastated by guilt. She kept apologizing for not believing me, for not having suspected earlier. I was no longer angry with her. We had all been puppets in Gabriel's elaborate theater. The soup was almost ready when my phone vibrated on the counter. It was an email from my lawyer. The subject line said, "Resolution of marital property liquidation." I held my breath and opened it. It was the final document. After the forced sale of everything we owned, after paying lawyers and the first compensations to the defrauded company, a residual amount corresponded to me. It wasn't much, just enough to start over, to pay the deposit on this apartment and Sophia's expenses for a while. But it was mine, earned with the blood, sweat, and tears of surviving the shipwreck. Attached to the email, there was another document. A letter from the law firm representing Gabriel. I opened it reluctantly. It was brief, succinct. Gabriel renounced all custody and parental authority over Sophia. In exchange he didn't beg, asked that when she was older she would know that he had always loved her, that his actions, however monstrous, had not been for lack of love toward her. I read the letter twice, then I closed my eyes. I felt no anger. I felt no relief. I felt nothing, a clean emptiness, like a room freshly swept after a great storm. That man no longer had the power to hurt me. He was a stranger who had lived in my house. "Everything okay, honey?" my mother asked, who had been watching me. "Yes," I said, and smiled for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. A small, tired but real smile. "Everything is liquidated." She nodded, understanding the weight of the word. Liquidated, it meant the end. The end of the legal, financial, emotional nightmare. "Mom, is the soup ready?" Sophia asked, poking her head through the kitchen door. "I'm hungry." "Yes, honey," I said, putting the phone away and filling a bowl. "Come, the soup is warm." The three of us sat at the kitchen table, which was too small for the old one, but perfect for this one. Sophia slurped the noodles loudly. My mother told me a bad joke she had heard in the supermarket line. I listened to them, watching their faces, illuminated by the warm light of the lamp we had hung over the table. Life wasn't perfect. It was full of scars, unanswered questions, vague nights and fears that still woke me up sweating. But it was real, and it was ours. After dinner, while my mother washed the dishes, and Sophia watched some cartoons, I went to the window. Night had fallen over the city. The lights of the other buildings flickered like terrestrial stars. Each one of them hid its own stories, its own tragedies and joys. I no longer looked back with anger or nostalgia. I looked forward, with my heart still aching but whole, with fear still present but tamed. I had lost much, almost everything. But I had found myself, and my daughter, and my mother. That was a beginning, a fragile, valuable, beautiful beginning. Sophia approached and took my hand. "Mom, can I sleep with you tonight?" "Of course, my love," I said, squeezing her little hand. "Always." And I knew in that instant that while we had that, the simple and true love of each day, no loose ends would remain in our hearts. The story was over. Life, our life, had just begun.